Hi everyone, today I am finally doing my review on the McGrath Mothership palettes. I got these months ago, but I haven't gotten around to filming this for several reasons. I won't get too much into it, but there was a fiasco with actually getting these to me that took ages. There was issues with customs, and on top of that there was a palette missing in my order, so that was not a pleasant experience, given that it does cost $25 US to actually ship to Australia, and I wasn't very pleased with the service, which is why I probably won't be ordering from the McGrath website again, or at least not in the near future. So if these end up on the Net-a-Porter website, I highly recommend going through them instead. Besides that, after I got them, I did have trouble actually getting them to work for me. As much as these shades are absolutely gorgeous, I just found that I didn't really know how to make them work that well. The first kind of looks that I did were on my sister, and they just didn't turn out that nice. And I was just wondering, how can I get these to look good? I couldn't figure it out. I know it sounds stupid, but when you get palettes that have like maybe a few matte shades and then majority of the shades are pops of color, you kind of wonder, how am I going to coordinate these colors all together? I don't know if I'm the only one that felt that way, but I definitely felt like I didn't really know how to use these palettes. And that has kind of been the criticism, I think, of these palettes, is that there isn't a very good mixture of finishes, and also there aren't enough shades in here to create a full eye look. After playing with these for a while, I would actually disagree. I think that these work beautifully by itself. Even if they don't, I don't really care about bringing in other colors, but honestly, I haven't found that for any of the looks that I've created a need to dip into other palettes, because what I think these are essentially are a smoky eye palette. You can create so many beautiful, interesting smoky eyes using this palette. I'm going to show you on the screen several looks that I've created using this palette. I have demoed one of them, and through that demo, that is basically the foundation that I've done for every one of my smoky eyes. In each of these palettes, you've got the matte black, which I've used as a base for these eyeshadows to sit on. Then you've got the second lighter matte color, which can be used to create a transition and smoke it out, and then use any of the other accent colors as a topper. And I find that when doing that, you get the best results. And that is really how I've done every single one of my smoky eye looks. And in my opinion, it's kind of revolutionized the way I do smoky eyes. I feel like I'm actually enjoying a black base smoky eye. I never really gravitate towards matte blacks, but it really works for each of these palettes. And so I understand why McGrath has included a matte black in each of her palettes. In terms of the cost, these babies cost an arm and a leg. As you know, McGrath items are never cheap. These cost $125 US per palette, or if you buy 3 of them, which I did, they're $300 US plus the $25 US for shipping to Australia. When I break that down, I think it was about 140 Aussie dollars per palette because of that discount when you buy them in bulk. These are all made in Italy, and I have to admit the quality of these eyeshadows are really nice. The mattes are beautiful. There's a matte black in each of them. And you know what? I'm not mad that there is a matte black in each of them, because I feel like it is a really good matte. And on top of that, you actually I feel like you do need a matte black in here in order to make these shadows work. So the mattes are beautiful. They blend really nicely. They're super pigmented, but sometimes, you know, super pigmented eyeshadows take a lot of time to blend. These don't. These just blend so beautifully and easily. The satins in here are gorgeous. They again apply beautifully, easily, and they last on the eyelid. And these 4 special shades here, the duochrome shades, are also a dream to work with. Now I find that for these shadows, I definitely need to use a glitter base, so something like a Pixie Epoxy, or you know, whatever glitter base you have, because I find that they do crease on me. So if you have textural eyelids, then that's something to keep in mind. But McGrath does give tips on her website as to how to use these, wet, dry, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, they do work beautifully, even though there's a bit of a learning curve to use these. Now moving on to the packaging, as you know, you probably heard, McGrath packaging is really luxe. And this for sure feels like a $125 palette. It is weighty. The back is engraved, and there's kind of like a special kind of mirror, which you don't see on a lot of palettes. The one thing that they effed up was they don't have the name of the palette, so you don't know which one's which. Okay, I think it's a little bit, it was a bit of a mistake on their part, but I mean, if you're not a content creator and you're not talking about these all the time and you're just using them, it doesn't really matter what the name of the palette is, isn't it? Just that you're using it. So I just call this the blue one. This is the green one. And then we've got the purple one, because who can remember the names? I do remember the names, but I just find it easier to say blue, green, purple. So the packaging is beautiful, effed up the name, but I don't care as well. Summary of my thoughts on that. So when it comes to really expensive palettes, most people just want to know one thing. Is it worth the money? In my opinion, yes, it is. Honestly, these are my favorite palettes of 2017, and I'll tell you why. I feel like these palettes have made me love smoky eyes. I feel like these palettes, you can create the most interesting, beautiful smoky eyes with them. It did take me a while to figure out how to actually get them to work. Like I said, there is a learning curve to it, but once I did, I just created so many beautiful looks with them. And if you ask me to choose which one, I can't tell you which one. I enjoy all of them. I think the shades are different enough in each of the palettes in order to justify buying all of them if you are so inclined to, and if your budget allows for it, because honestly, I do think they're worth the money, and I do think that each of them will give you a very different result. So yeah, enough with the rambling. If you want to see a demo of these swatches and dupes of these palettes, then just keep watching. I have left timestamps down below as usual in case you want to skip to a certain part. So I'm going to be demoing how I got this look using the Subversive palette, which I'm just going to refer to as the purple palette. But first, I'm going to put a headband on because now that I've got a fringe, it tends to get in the way of everything. And this is one from Miniso. It's really cute and it was only $4. So first I'm going in with Fairnay Pixie Epoxy, and I'm using this because, as you see, I've got lots of folds and texture, and if I don't put this on, it is going to crease on me. I have tested it with several primers and this one works best. So first I'm going in with Extreme Black, and this is the matte black in each of the Pat McGrath palettes. But you know what? I actually really like this matte black. I don't generally use black ever. I don't know why I never did, but this one is a really good one. And as you can see, it's pigmented, it blends easily, and there's hardly any fallout. So more of the story is, I'm not mad that there's 3 blacks because I really like it. And I've been using it for every look that I've done using her palettes. So what I'm doing is placing the matte black on the outer corner up to the center of my mobile lid as the foundation for my smoky eye. I've done this step for every one of my looks using her palettes, and you'll find that the duochrome shades really do stand out using black or deep shade as a base, which I'm guessing is why she's included it in each of her palettes. Then I'm going with the other matte in this palette. It doesn't really matter what the name is because the names aren't on the palette, as I would have mentioned earlier. And I'm using this in the crease. Like Extreme Black, this matte is beautiful to work with. It blends easily, it applies very nicely, it's not patchy, and it's very buildable. So in each of the Mothership palettes, there is another deep matte shade, and what I've been doing with it is buffing it into the crease and where the black meets, as well as winging it out. If you've seen any of my tutorials, you'll know that this is generally the shape that I stick with because I just find it flattering for my eye shape. I know it's a bit formulaic, but once you find something that works for you, then I would stick with it. Then I'm going to take a fluffy brush and just diffuse it out so it looks a little bit softer and not as harsh. It blends really nicely and it doesn't muddy the look, which is very important. Then I'm going with this shade here called Lazarus, and this is a metallic brown shade with red undertones, and I'm just placing that on the center of the lid and kind of blending it into the black. I'm going to build up the black a bit more to intensify it as well as layer it over Lazarus, so I've got a really nice gradient. I'm going to take this metallic gold shade. This is called Skin Show Fever, and I'm putting that on the inner portion of my eyelid just to highlight the eye and give it a little bit more light because it looks very dark at the moment. Just going to blend everything out again. Now we're going to start using some of the fun shades, and this is VR Pink, and this is a duochrome shade. It is a pink with a coppery gold shift to it. And what's so interesting about this shade is it looks very different depending on what you layer it on top of. And obviously it's going to shift as it catches the light at different angles. By the way, does anyone know what VR stands for? I'm guessing virtual reality, but I'm not 100% sure. Let me know. I'm going to go back in with that matte brown shade to define the crease, redefine the crease, to make sure that it hasn't gotten lost amongst all the other colors. And I'm also going to go back in with the black to make it look more smoky. And this is going to be a reoccurring thing where I reassess and just keep building things up as it needs. Speaking of which, I'm going to build up VR Pink a little bit more. I'm going to add another one of the color shifting shades and put it in between the matte black and the pink shade, just to give it some dimension. Then I'm taking this teeny tiny brush from Hakuhodo and I'm running the matte brown shade on my lower lash line, just to give my lower lash some definition. I'm also going to add some black to the lower lash as well, to the outer portion in particular. And finally, I'm going to blend everything out to clean it all up. And I'm also going to smoke out the lower lash line. And here is one of the many smoky eyes I've created with this palette. I just think you can create so many interesting different looks with all of them. So the first palette I'll be swatching is the Sublime palette, aka the blue palette. The first one is Skin Show Nude, and this is a golden pearl shimmer shade. This shade applies pretty well both with a brush and dry. I didn't find any need to wet my brush. Then we've got Depth, and this is one of 3 matte shades in this palette, and it is a deep brown shade. I found all the mattes to work really nicely in each of the Pat McGrath palettes. Ultimate Taupe is a matte taupe shade. Don't you just love it when the name of the shade corresponds with the color? Anyway, this shade is great for sculpting and contouring the eyelid. Pale Gold 002 is the lighter version of the Gold 002 pigment, which was one of the first releases from Pat McGrath. This one works best when applied with a damp brush or on top of a glitter base. VR Violet is a gorgeous duochromatic shade and it has a pink to blue shift. It's fairly unique to my collection, and this one works best over a glitter base or on top of other dark shades. Extreme Black is the matte black that is in each of the Mothership palettes. Now this is a really excellent black. As you can see, the color payoff is really good and it is blendable, buildable, and everything you'd want in a matte black. Lilac Dusk is a lavender grey with a metallic finish. It's fairly sheer, but it does add some dimension to a smoky eye, and I've really enjoyed how it turned out layered over the black. Substance is a metallic taupe brown shade, and this one is really nicely pigmented, blends really well, applies really well. Blitz Blue is a vibrant dark blue shade. This one does need to be used either with fingers, which Pat McGrath does recommend, or with a damp brush, or on top of a glitter glue. And lastly, we have Astral White, which shifts from silvery white to blue, and this shade really works as magic when it's used on top of black. So these are all the shades lined up next to each other. Honestly, the swatches don't do these shades justice because they are so much more beautiful on the eyes. In terms of dupes, we've got Indian Gold, which is slightly darker and more intense. And then we've got this single from Coloured Rain, which is again slightly darker and a bit warmer. This shade from the Nubian palette is the tiniest bit darker and is the most similar shade I found to Depth. This shade from the 2015 Marc Jacobs Holiday palette is darker and warmer. And Hickory from Mega Pro 3 is also slightly darker. Diadem from the Star palette is darker and the formula is also softer and smoother. Naked is somewhat similar but has more beige undertones than grey. I actually found it pretty difficult to find a dupe for this particular shade because of the very high shine metallic finish. Probably the closest to that is this one by Danessa Merrick's. It isn't strictly a eyeshadow, but it is a gold with a white silvery base. Radiance is also similar, but as you can see, the shimmer particles are much more finely milled and as a result, it doesn't look as foiled. Aziza from the new Juvia's Place palette is also similar, but not as vibrant. And same goes for this one from Coloured Rain. This is probably one of the most unique shades in my collection, and the only thing remotely similar to VR Violet was B&C from Hello Waffle, which is an indie brand and it's also in a loose eyeshadow form. Black Moon is a pretty intense black as well, but less matte. It's more of a satin finish as it's got that slight sheen to it. Bonobo is a pretty matte black, but it's not as pigmented or blendable as Extreme Black. Bulletproof also wasn't as pigmented, but it does build up pretty nicely. Kat Von D also makes a pretty nice matte black, and the formula is extremely soft to the touch. If you like the Lorac Pro formula, then there's a matte black in here too, but the only thing is that I find that the wear time isn't as good as some of my other eyeshadows. Numeric Proof makes some of the most pigmented eyeshadows I've ever used, and the black is no exception. The only thing I found is that the black does stain. Moon from the Galaxy Chic palette is very similar, and this is a baked shadow formula. Pluto is from the same palette and it's slightly darker. This one from the Holiday 2015 palette is darker and has a stronger brown base, and Loam from Illamasqua pulls more grey. Busted from my Naked One palette is very similar and has that same pearly sheen finish to it, and Dark Horse from the Naked 2 is warmer. Cleopatra is almost an identical twin but slightly less vibrant, similarly with Nebula. This one from Coloured Rain probably is the closest match in terms of its high shine look, and if you've ever used their eyeshadows, you'll know that the metallics are very richly pigmented. Blue Space is slightly darker and duller. And for comparison, I'm swatching the Ultraviolet Blue pigment from the Dark Star collection, and they are both very different. I absolutely love the Ultraviolet Blue pigment. It's one of my favorite and unique eyeshadows to my collection. Astral White was one of those really difficult shades to dupe because it's so unique. The closest I found to this was by an Aussie indie brand, but as you can see, the finish is very different. Now moving on to the Sublime palette, aka the green one. We've got Skin Show Glow, which is a light pink shade with a slight sheen to it. This one can break up into chunks, as you can see here, and the texture is also very thick and creamy and almost wet to the touch, which is same for this shade, which is copper toned, Iconic, and also Rose Dusk, which all have a pearl finish. Iconic is a warm brown shade with a golden sheen to it. It performs and applies really nicely. Bronze 005 is a repeat from the Metamorphosis collection. It's a bronze shade with a very strong metallic finish. It felt and looked pretty loosely pressed in the pan compared to the other shadows. VI Nectar is such a beautiful and unique duochrome shade. It has a sheer brown base with a pink to golden orangey shift. And again, we've got Extreme Black, which is an intense matte black. Dark is the other matte in this palette, and it's a deep matte brown shade with red undertones. Rose Dusk is a rose red shade with warm undertones, kind of orange almost, and it goes on incredibly smoothly both with fingers or a brush. Blitz Emerald is a metallic green shade with very finely milled light green glitter particles over a black base. This one works best applied with a finger or a wet brush. And lastly, we have Astral Ghost Orchid, which is a duochrome shade also featured in the purple Subversive palette. It has a silvery white base with a pink to purple shift and works best layered over some sort of base. So this is what all the shades look like swatched next to each other. My favorite shades here are probably VI Nectar and Blitz Emerald. So for dupes of Skin Show Glow, we have this shade from Sakurakaba Quad from Suku, which I believe is discontinued, but if you have it, they are extremely similar. This one from A Dior Quint is cooler and more of a baby pink. Vermeer is frostier and lighter. Sorry about my lighting, by the way. Sometimes it just kind of misbehaves. Then for dupes of Copper Toned, we have this one from the Marc Jacobs Holiday Collection for 2017, which is very similar. Bronzage is slightly darker. And Vintage is even darker again. For dupes of Iconic, we've got Paris from the coveted Master Palette by Mario. I know it's limited edition, but it was the closest thing I found in my collection. This one from Dior is lighter with a paler gold sheen. And lastly, Ochre from the 28 Pan Green Brown palette is richer and more metallic. Bronze 005 is again one of those difficult shades to dupe because it has such a unique texture. Heat has those same bronze undertones and has extremely fine glitter particles, but doesn't pack a punch like Bronze 005 does. Atria is slightly more orange, but is also very richly pigmented. For comparison, I'm swatching the Bronze 005 cream version from the Metamorphosis collection. As you can see, it's more dull compared to the powder version. Ara, which is a new ice whip from Ritual de Fille, was the closest I found, but it's still not that close. It does have a pink to golden shift, but it does have more of a pale pink and pale gold sheen to it, but it does give that same wet look. Compared to Dark, Kenya is slightly lighter and warmer. Numeric Proof is quite a bit darker, but when sheared out it does give a similar result, and Cypress Umber from the Modern Renaissance palette is cooler. Rose Dusk was surprisingly unique to my collection. The closest I found was Muse from the Master Palette by Mario, which in retrospect isn't that similar at all. For dupes of Blitz Emerald, I have Totale, which, I don't know if I'm saying that right, it has the same black base and a lot of green and gold shimmer particles. Bottle Green is a paler green. Egypt is more of a forest green. Unexpected is darker and cooler. Forbidden is much deeper and cooler but has that same blackened base. Starry Skies from Hello Waffle is pretty spot on. Sadly, I spilt this all over my carpet, so now I only have probably a handful of uses left. But it is very similar, but less intense. Synergy has a similar pinky purple shift, but the shimmer particles are much more finely milled, and this is technically a highlighter, but I like to use it as an eyeshadow also. Last but not least, we have the Subversive palette, aka the purple one. Skin Show Fever is a beige gold with a satin pearly sheen. It's got that creamy, thick, almost wet touch feel that pretty much all the Pat McGrath satins have. Then we have Night Creature, which is a purple shimmery shade with a reddish brown base. Deep Shade is one of the two matte shades in this palette, and it's a medium brown with reddish warm undertones. Gigabyte is a highly metallic greenish olive gold shade. Words cannot describe how beautiful this shade is. VR Pink is a duochrome shade with a pink to copper shift. This one is a lot more pink compared to VR Nectar, which is more peachy. Again, we've got Extreme Black, which is the repeat and in each of the three palettes, and it's a really great black to act as a base for the accent shades to go on top of. Lazarus is a brown shade with warm red undertones and a satin finish. Black Metal is a metallic black shade with silver sparkles. This shade does need to be built up because I feel like the base is quite sheer. Blitz Amethyst is a duochrome shade with a blue to pink shift, which is kind of hard to see, and it has a lavender grey base. Astral Ghost White is a repeat, which is also found in the Sublime palette. These are all the shades swatched side by side with the shimmer and duochrome shades over Pixie Epoxy, which gives you an idea of how intense they would appear on the lid. So for dupes of Skin Show Fever, we have Pearl from the Natasha Denona 10 pan palette, which is basically an exact dupe. Half Baked from the Naked One is darker. And for comparison, Skin Show Nude is a lot lighter and has more of a silvery sheen. This one from Shiro matched the shimmery finish but is deeper. And Queen Mother is similar in that it has the same base and undertones but much less sparkly. For dupes of Deep Shade, we have Dogma from the Dreamy palette and it's slightly cooler. Volcano has more red in it. Gemma is cooler. Nighty Night from one of the Coloured Rain minis is slightly lighter. And Chocolate, which is a single, is almost an exact dupe, maybe a hair cooler. The only dupe I could find for Gigabyte was Lucky Charmed, which is quite similar but pulls more green than yellow. I couldn't really find any dupes for VR Pink, but I am going to compare it to VR Nectar because in the pan it does look very similar. But as you can see, VR Pink is more pink and VR Nectar pulls more peachy pink. For dupes of Lazarus, we have DK Roast, which is cooler. This one from the Nubian palette is probably the closest dupe I have. Secrets, which is a single eyeshadow from Coloured Rain, is slightly darker but still has those red undertones in it. Surprisingly, I couldn't find any exact dupes for Black Metal as the most similar shades have a much stronger black base like this one from the Smoke Show Mini from Coloured Rain, which has silver and brown sparkles. This one from the Marc Jacobs Holiday 2015 palette is also more of a matte with rainbow shimmer particles. I couldn't find any exact dupes for Blitz Amethyst because it is a very unique shade, but Bruised is somewhat similar in that it has a similar base and blue sparkle, but it doesn't have that pink shift to it. Same goes for Burlesque, which has more of a vibrant purple base. So that's the end of the video. Hope you've enjoyed this. This has taken a lot of effort and work to get this video up. But I hope that you found it useful, and let me know if you've got these palettes or if you want to get these palettes and what you think about them. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.